Welcome back to Ethical Adulthood. This is Season 3, Episode 9 of the Atlas of Our Lives, where we're exploring maps. Throughout this season, I've been using the word map as a metaphor for the frameworks human beings have used to orient themselves in the world. Maps help us answer questions like, who am I? How should I live? What is good? What is true? And how do I make sense of suffering, success, relationships, and uncertainty? The difficult part is that reality never hands us a legend that says, this is the correct map. So this season isn't about deciding which maps are right and which are wrong. It's about learning how to read maps well enough so that they become our servants rather than our masters as we navigate adulthood after certainty collapses. And today we are taking on astrology. And I say taking on because this is probably the episode I've been most nervous to record. Because for the first time, I can't quite situate where I stand on this map. I'm genuinely uncertain what I think about it. As a scientist, it would be much more comfortable to dismiss astrology entirely. Most scientific testing has not supported the strong claims astrologers often make. And yet, two things are true. Millions of thoughtful, intelligent, scientifically aware people across thousands of years have found something in this map that they consider deeply meaningful. And so, even though I lack faith in the map from a logical standpoint, I cannot tell you that it hasn't led me to truthful insights and uncanny, creepily accurate descriptions of what I know about the terrain it's mapping. So, today's episode isn't an attempt to disprove astrology, nor will it be a straightforward, here's what people who use this map think, and here's where it's useful, and here's where it's deceptive. No. It will not be a debunking, nor a simple, fair, and balanced take on it. It's an attempt instead to understand it in a deeper way than most of us, I think, have tried to do. And perhaps even more importantly, it's an attempt to understand my own bias. Because that's the real question I'm wrestling with. How should an intellectually honest person respond when a map seems surprisingly compelling, but doesn't fit comfortably within the scientific worldview they trust? I don't know the answer. So let's go looking. Well, when I was growing up in the late 1970s, there was one question everybody asked at parties or at bars. What's your sign? It wasn't really about astrology. It was a pickup line. Nobody was discussing ascendants or natal charts or planetary aspects. It was simply a playful way to begin a conversation. So I grew up reading newspaper horoscopes the way a lot of people did. I knew I was a Cancer. I knew there were 12 signs. And if someone started talking about astrology, I'd nod politely and move on. Then I went to university. Well, 6 years of science education wrung most of the appreciation for alternative frameworks out of me. Astrology, numerology, tarot, psychic readings from a kiosk at the Renaissance Fair, channeling, alien visitation, people who routinely did remote viewing or had out-of-body experiences. The message was fairly straightforward. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So until there is compelling evidence, skepticism is the appropriate response. So I stopped nodding politely. I started rolling my eyes. And I stopped participating in continued education in those areas. And then certainty collapsed. Not just the maps I thought were certain failed me, but the maps I thought were uncertain came into view in a way that they hadn't before. During yoga teacher training, I met people who took astrology very seriously. Not casually, seriously. They knew the planets, the houses, the aspects, the ascendant. And they wanted to know the exact minute I was born because they insisted that without that information, they couldn't accurately read my chart. Suddenly, astrology wasn't a pickup line or a parlor game anymore. It was being presented as a sophisticated system, a complete map describing personality, relationships, strengths and weaknesses, recurring patterns, even life direction. Well, that caught my attention, not because I suddenly believed it, but because the map had incredible staying power, number one. And number two, I started putting in some dates into the charts and discovering, well, some uncomfortable announcements. So here I am, and I'm very curious about this system now. So I'm not asking and answering where is this true and where is this false. I'd rather ask several smaller questions. What kind of a map is it? What problem is it trying to solve beyond who am I? Why has it endured for so long? And where do we need to pay attention to how we read this map? Because this map doesn't tell you what the terrain means. It only tells you where certain symbolic landmarks are said to be. So it begins with an ephemeris. This is a table showing the positions of celestial bodies at a specific date and time. Astrology software uses those positions to generate a natal chart. Then, an astrologer tells you what it means. And they choose a specific meaning maker. And there are dozens of them. And they use, the astrologer, I'm saying, differing amounts of psychology, intuition, body language reading. Plus, they straight up ask you if the direction that they're heading sounds right to you. And you look at your life and use a new map to interpret the astrological map. So there are really three maps here. The ephemeris, the astrologer's symbolic tradition and orientation around the map, and our own interpretation of what we hear. That's some complexity right there. So, given all of this, how should someone like me, someone trained in science, but also deeply interested in human meaning, carry this map with wisdom? To help answer that question, I decided to do something a little unusual. I designed a small experiment. Not to test astrology, I'm not that ambitious, but to test myself. I asked several people that I know, and I chose 2 public figures and 1 dummy account for a control to participate. My husband, Mike, would collect their birth information. We're going to generate anonymous natal chart reports. So removing any identifying information, just looking at the chart. And then I am going to read those charts and have the names of the people and try to match the profile to the correct person. Simple, right? I don't know. Maybe I'll do better than chance. Maybe I'll surprise myself. Either way, I'm going to learn something. Not only about astrology, but about how easily I'm persuaded. Because there are several reasons astrology can feel astonishingly accurate. Sometimes we just have become the kind of person that we've been told we are. Maybe I'm nurturing because I was told I was nurturing. Since elementary school, I've known I'm a Cancer. I like staying home, nurturing others, and being persistent. So true. And Cancer is withdrawing, strongly attached to tradition, and emotionally sensitive. Okay, less true. We notice the hits and we forget the misses. We remember the sentences that resonate and quietly discard the ones that don't. And perhaps there are explanations for why this quote unquote works that we don't yet understand. The collective unconscious has been explored by Jung, and he's no lightweight in my atlas. How much of that is responsible for what I've experienced with astrology in my own life? I'll tell you an example. I put 4 dates into the software. I put my birthday, the birthday of my marriage, the incorporation or birthday of my yoga studio, and the first upload date and time of my podcast, Ethical Adulthood. And do you know, every one of them had the moon in Scorpio? So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Because I didn't know. Want to know? Okay. The moon represents how I instinctively bond, seek comfort, and react under stress. Now, Scorpio is traditionally associated with intensity, transformation, secrets, death and rebirth, emotional depth, trust, betrayal, and psychological insight. Whew. There's a fascination in Scorpio with psychology, hidden motives, taboo subjects, and what lies beneath appearances. So, trust, depth, transformation. Myself that became a psychologist, my marriage that has transformed us both in ways neither of us were actually looking for, my Kundalini yoga and meditation studio, it's built for transformation. My current endeavor dealing with the psychological capacities that lie beneath ethical orientation. I mean, like I said, from where I'm standing, that feels creepily accurate. A repetitive pattern. But then I asked what the moon in Sagittarius meant. And to be fair, that sounded good too. Archetypes resonate with us all at one time or another. And we often want to believe. So it's so comforting to be seen correctly by a map. I honor this truth in my lived experience. The second half of this two-part episode will reveal the results. Today, though, we're going to ask and try to answer the basic orienting questions. What is this map? What are some of the more interesting ways it can be read? How and why did it arise and remain part of our shared reality? And finally, what are the advantages and the pitfalls to falling in love with this map? Okay, so what is this map? At its core, astrology proposes a remarkably simple idea. The positions of the sun, moon, and planets at the moment a person is born are not merely astronomical facts. They are symbolically meaningful. Notice what I said. Not causally meaningful. Symbolically meaningful. Whether that's true, is the symbology meaningful, is exactly what we're here to explore. I mean, I'm not asking whether there is a physical mechanism by which the planets affect our lives. So the first thing an astrologer creates is called a natal chart, sometimes called a birth chart. It's literally a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment and place of your birth. Imagine freezing the heavens for just one instant. Where was the sun? Where was the moon? Where were Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the other visible planets? What constellation, or rather what sign, was each one passing through? What was rising over the eastern horizon? What was setting in the west? Those positions are plotted onto a circular diagram that looks, frankly, a little intimidating the first time you see it. It's full of symbols and intersecting lines, numbers, wedges, and glyphs that resemble a cross between astronomy, geometry, and some kind of ancient shorthand. And to someone who doesn't know how to read it, it looks like an ancient mystical map you've never been shown in school. To an astrologer, it's the map from which everything else begins. Then comes the interpretation. Astrology isn't telling us what caused your personality. It begins by asking, what does the sky symbolize at the moment your life begins? Think of it as kind of a cosmic clock. When you walk into a room and glance at a clock, the clock doesn't cause the meeting to begin. It just tells you what time it is. Astrology makes a similar claim. The heavens don't necessarily create who you are. They reveal the quality of the moment into which you were born. Now, whether that symbolic relationship is real, of course, is exactly what we're investigating, because that's the basic idea of astrology. Every natal chart is built from 4 basic ingredients. The planets, or luminaries, answer the question, what part of the psyche are we talking about? The sun represents the organizing principle of the self, the identity. Who am I becoming? The moon represents emotional life. How do I instinctively feel and seek comfort? Mercury asks, how do I think and communicate? Venus asks, what do I love and value? Mars asks, how do I act? Jupiter asks, how do I grow and expand? Saturn asks, where do I meet limits, responsibility, and discipline? Uranus asks, how do I become free? Neptune asks, what do I long for? And Pluto asks, how do I transform? Each of the planets answers a question that a thinking, intelligent person has about their life. The zodiac signs answer a different question. How does that planetary energy express itself? Okay, Mars in Aries is expressed differently than Mars in Pisces. The moon in Scorpio is expressed differently than the moon in Sagittarius. The planet is the function. The sign is its style. Now the houses answer yet another question. Where in life does this tendency tend to show up? First house, identity. Second house, resources. Third house, learning and communication. Fourth house, home and roots. Fifth house, creativity and joy. Sixth house, work and health. Seventh house, partnerships. Eighth house, transformation. Ninth house, meaning. 10th house, vocation. 11th house, community. And 12th house, the unseen. So the planets tell you what's acting. The signs tell you how it acts. And the houses tell you where in your life it tends to act. Wow. Finally, the aspects describe how these different parts of the chart interact. Do they cooperate? Do they create tension? Do they support one another? Or do they compete for attention? So that's the basic architecture. Everything else in astrology is built from those 4 pieces. So what are some of the more interesting ways that this map is read? There isn't just one school of psychology, and there isn't just one school of astrology. And the same natal chart can be interpreted through very different lenses depending on the astrologer. So here are just a few of the major traditions. First up, traditional Western astrology. This is the oldest surviving Western tradition, tracing its roots through Hellenistic, Persian, Arabic, and medieval European astrologers. It tends to focus on concrete questions: career, marriage, children, health, the timing of important events, and the overall shape of a person's life. Next, psychological astrology. Beginning largely in the 20th century, astrologers influenced by Jung shifted the emphasis away from prediction and toward personality, unconscious patterns, and psychological growth. The chart became less about fate and more about understanding the inner self. Oh, evolutionary astrology. Two that come to mind, obviously Stephen Forrest and Jeffrey Wolf Green. This is the branch that first caught my attention. It views the birth chart as describing the soul's evolutionary journey across many lifetimes. So rather than asking what's going to happen to me, it asks, what is my soul trying to learn? And whether or not you believe in reincarnation, it's a fascinating shift in perspective. Dane Rudhyar's humanistic astrology. Humanistic astrologers treat the chart as a map of human potential. The emphasis isn't on predicting the future, but on becoming a more integrated, whole person. In many ways, it parallels humanistic psychology. And the last one I'll discuss is Vedic astrology. Developed independently in India, Vedic astrology uses different calculations, including a sidereal zodiac rather than the tropical zodiac used by most Western astrologers. It's a deeply intertwined with Hindu philosophy, and it often places greater emphasis on karma, timing, and spiritual development. Now, notice something interesting. These astrologers aren't arguing over people. They're looking at the same birth chart through different maps, which means that even within astrology, there isn't one astrology. There are many traditions, each emphasizing different aspects of what they believe the chart reveals. And of course, even within one tradition, two astrologers may have quite different ways of telling you what they see in that chart. So, yeah, complexity. All right, next question I want to look at is how and why did this map arise? Well, like almost every map we've explored this season, astrology began as an attempt to answer a very practical question. What's going to happen next? Long before modern science, people noticed that the heavens were remarkably orderly. Sun always came up, sun always went down. The moon followed its predictable cycle. The planets wandered across the sky in recognizable patterns. The seasons arrived. The tides changed. Seeds sprouted. Animals migrated. To someone interested in what was going on up above, the heavens looked anything but random. If the sky governs the seasons, perhaps it also governs human life. I mean, why not? This was not an unreasonable hypothesis, especially for someone living 3,000 years ago. Ancient Babylonian priests began carefully recording celestial events and then comparing them with earthly events. And of course, they looked for patterns. And of course, they found them. So kings consulted astrologers before wars. Farmers looked to the heavens before planting. Navigators steered by the stars. And eventually the Greeks transformed those observations into a symbolic system, asking not merely when things happened, but what they meant. Well, from there, astrology spread throughout the Roman world and into Persia, the Islamic Golden Age, medieval Europe, India, and eventually right here into modern psychology. For most of human history, astronomy and astrology were not separate disciplines. They were the same map. Only much later did astronomy become an empirical science, while astrology remained a symbolic one. So the next question is then why does it remain part of our shared reality here in the late 2020s, beginning of the 21st century? Because it answers questions science was never designed to answer. Science can tell me how stars form. Astrology tries to tell me what my life means. Science can predict the orbit of Mars. Astrology asks whether Mars symbolizes something in me. Does a full moon translate into more crime or more weirdness or more anger in people? Does Mercury in retrograde foretell a time when delays, misunderstandings, revisions, and mistakes are more prone to happen? Science and astrology are not trying to answer the same questions. Whether astrology answers the question, what does my chart reveal about my destiny, is what we're exploring here. But it's hard to overstate how hungry human beings are for orientation. We want to know who we are, why we struggle, what we're here to learn, whether suffering has a purpose, whether our lives make sense, whether it's a good time to begin a new endeavor. Astrology offers answers to those questions. And because those questions never disappear, neither has astrology. The final question for this episode was, what are the advantages and the dangers of falling in love with this particular map? Now, the advantages, or the gifts from this map, are substantial if one uses some discernment. What patterns keep repeating in my life? By answering this can begin the interruption of the automaticity that comes from conditioning and suffering we've experienced. That can lead to true transformation and a more well-adjusted and contented life. What are my talents and gifts? Recognizing that what is lighting you up in life is seen and understood by a map to be true and righteous, that can be a catalyst to lean into a real strength we have, causing us to become more powerful in our creativity, our influence, and our joys. A map that invites curiosity, reflection, and awareness is a good map to explore. You might agree. Now, the dangers of falling in love with this map might look like this. An employee wants to know her boss's date and time of birth. She says she finds him difficult to work with. She may be using this map to comfort her assumptions that her boss is the bad guy. Instead of using the map to help herself, She's using it to avoid discomfort and to pigeonhole a person she cannot or will not try to understand. A first date leads to one asking the other their sign. Scorpio? My ex was a Scorpio. See ya. An argument devolves into, what did I expect from a Gemini? It's like you're two people. The danger arises from this move. This is interesting. Let's explore. To, no, this is the verdict. Let's end the conversation. Can we let this map teach us without feeling as if we're wasting our time with nonsensical charts that have no bearing on human life? Can we let this map exist without holding it so tightly that we lose discernment and agency around who we are becoming and what we can succeed in doing? For me, astrology remains unresolved. I've seen enough to know that my seeing is incomplete. I've seen enough that I am forced to pause. I've also seen enough confirmation bias to keep me skeptical. I don't know whether this map can tell us who we are. I only know that it's an elegant way to answer the universally fabulous query, who am I? Maybe the point is, it reminds us to keep asking the question. In part 2, I'll let you know what happened with the experiment. Thanks for listening. I'm Andrea Fiondo. This is Ethical Adulthood, and I'll see you next time.